and it's recording. And of course, when we use Zoom, it looks more and more like when you used to do Spiritism in the 19th century. Are you there? Can you hear me? Dimitri Orlov, I'm very happy to host you again this year, second time this year on my channel. How are you doing?
Good, good. Everything's great.
I'm just back from Moscow, and I had a great time in Russia. Unfortunately, we couldn't come to St. Petersburg, but I was in Altai and in Moscow, and everything was good. And my people who don't like Russia said, "Oh, they just showed you some Potemkin village." Can you argument that for me?
Yes, the Potemkin village idea is actually uh, ancient fake Western news. There were never any Potemkin villages, so they only exist as a term in Western propaganda. Um, the idea was that so many villages in Russia, which is now the Donbass, couldn't have been built in towns, couldn't have been built in such record short time, but they were. So by the time Catherine II toured the countryside of Nova Russia, everything was ready to go. These were not just facades, these were lots of new towns and villages that had been settled. Um, but Western propagandists couldn't abide by the idea that Russia had suddenly expanded by a giant new, previously vacant province. So they came up with this idea of the Potemkin village, and it's a ruse. It's a propaganda trope that exists to this day, and people keep saying it.
So what you're saying is that a few centuries later, the same propaganda is still at work.
That's right. They don't come up with anything new in the West. They just recycle old shit.
Yeah. In fact, I just for people who may not know, but I've seen supermarkets and markets in even small villages who are full of goods, people buying them. I'm not saying life is super easy everywhere, but life seems to go on. The fuel is in the cars run, people go on their business, whether it's countryside business or city business. There is all sorts of activities which are sign of a very thriving economy. You live in Russia today. What's your take of Russia in 2025?
I think that people have this wrong idea that Russia is somehow separate from the rest of the world, that it's different. In fact, you can walk into a shop, not one of those high-priced supermarkets, but just one of those regular shops that regular people, not high-income people, not the bourgeoisie, shop at, and find the same selection of Russian-made products for the same low prices. So it's not just Russia, but it's also Belarus. It used to be the Ukraine. Um, it used to be Moldova, Georgia still, Armenia still, Azerbaijan, all of Central Asia, all of the stands of Central Asia. They basically are eating Russia. Russia is the giant purveyor of foodstuffs to the entire world. And that's what people are missing, is that if Russian foodstuffs, grain especially, stopped, half the planet would starve. I can't hear you. Can't hear you.
Russia, I
Now
cut
I can hear
the
you.
mic for the remove background noise. Russia is today, I checked, the third agricultural producer in the world, which is outstanding. But again, logical considering the large amounts of vast land area that exists, and it seemed to me in over this trip that there's also no sign of a war economy. It looks like a perfectly normal country. There is a war, or as it is officially called, a special military operation, but it doesn't look like the country is on war footing. It's very mild, at least. The impact of that is very mild. You think it's a mistake, by the way, that it should be stronger, or it's okay to go on this way because it works?
Well, Russia is winning against all of NATO with one hand tied behind its back, which is a really good result. It's not really a war at all. A special military operation pretty much describes it. Russia has deployed perhaps one third, perhaps less of its military in this conflict and in the former Ukraine. Uh, it um, it doesn't set the goal. See, the two sides have very different goals. The Ukrainian side and all of NATO have this idea that every single um, city and town and village in the Donbass has to be fought for, no matter how many Ukrainians and mercenaries die in the process. And the Russians are in the business of killing those Ukrainians and mercenaries, not liberating those towns and villages, because Russia has enough territory. It's not looking for more territory. It's looking to eliminate its enemies, which it's doing very successfully. Now, how long it takes to eliminate all of its enemies? Well, the idea is to kill them faster than new ones are being born. So Russia is doing that quite successfully. If you look at the population statistics in the Ukraine and in the countries where those mercenaries come from, the birth rates are much lower than the death rates. So Russia is winning by that definition. And so there is really no reason why the Russian economy or Russian society at large should be affected in physical terms. I think it's being affected in mental terms. I think there's a great deal of rethinking that's going on in Russia. It's basically, crossing out Europe as something to deal with, to have anything to do with. And Europe is being very helpful by not giving visas to Russians, etc., creating difficulties. So that's happening. But really, it's not a war. It's not really affecting Russia that much, um, except for this wave of enthusiasm that's sweeping the country. I don't see anything different, really.
Now you have written for probably 20 years on the collapse of Western society, and more precisely the US, and you also, in the 5 stages of collapse, theorized the 5 stages. I don't see any of those stages in Russia. However, in the West, and I have to go back soon, I see these stages increasing and expanding and spreading to every place. I also do feel that a lot of people are realizing that the quality of life is decreasing. The trust in whatever institution still exists, the government, the media, the judges, the justice, has disappeared massively, and the West looks bad. Would you, from your experience, and you lived in the US, you can now, you're back to Russia. Um, how would you expect 2026 to be for the Western countries?
Well, I've written quite a bit about that recently. Europe has pretty much damned itself through a few different techniques. One is population replacement. So now you have in the UK, for instance, the problem that the native population is fleeing. A lot of the young people are basically thinking of a new world, of a new place in the world where they could resettle, because they no longer recognize their country as their own. They no longer they feel like they're living in a foreign country already, so why not go to another foreign country where life is better? Because the UK to them is now a foreign country. It's
Yes.
it's a Muslim country. It's very violent. It's destitute. Um, lots of people on drugs, and just generally unpleasant. So why not just go someplace else? So that's not a really good trend for a country that wants to remain in existence. Um, Similar things are happening in France. And on top of that, you have to add the fact that France will be without electricity pretty soon because their old nuclear power plants are too old to continue running. They're having a lot of problem with cracks in the welds because to start with, they used the wrong grade of steel to build them. A grade of steel that used to be made in the Ukraine. Now it's no longer made anywhere, as far as I can tell, or as far as I know. Um, so it'll be a bankrupt, destitute place without industry pretty soon. So again, native French would do well to look for other places in the world, such as yourself looking to spend more time in Turkey, as far as I can tell,
Yep.
uh, or in Russia. Um, and so that's the typical thing that's happening. But what Europe has done to itself is replace its population with people who knows from where, that don't really have anything to do with the history or the culture of the place and don't really want to have any part of it. They're just looking to loot the place, as far as I can tell. And another thing is that the Green New Deal has pretty much run its course, and people now recognize that ideology does not equal a stable power grid or the ability to heat your homes or take hot showers. Um, so they've pretty much that has pretty much run its course, although they can't say that. They can't say that the Green New Deal is dead and that the whole carbon dioxide fixation is just ridiculous as far as climate change. They can't really admit that. But what they're doing now in order to continue to hold on to power is what I'm calling the Brown New Deal, named after the brown shirts of Nazi Germany. So basically, there's a new wave of pseudo militarization sweeping Europe. And considering that they've lost the ability to make weapons, or they never regained it after World War II, because the Americans made sure that the Europeans couldn't make weapons by themselves. So I guess they're going to be buying or licensing American technology to build weapons, which isn't very good either, as has been shown in the Ukraine. And also attempting to draft people, and that's going very, very badly. If your population of young men is trying to run away, you're not going to draft them very successfully. So that's all a joke, and they're keeping it going because it does two things. It provides some kind of a cover for them holding on to their political jobs, even though they're incredibly unpopular at this point. They're basically saying that, well, Russia is going to attack any moment now, so trust us. We're going to try to save you, which is just completely ridiculous. Russia is never going to attack Europe because there's nothing there that Russia wants. Um, Nothing at all.
I cannot imagine what would be interesting in Europe.
Well, it's interesting, but
No, I
this has
mean,
been going on for 200 years. Dostoevsky said that the greatest thing about Europe is the gravestones, and those are nice to visit once in a while.
yeah,
That was Dostoevsky. And when was that? That was a century and a half ago.
yeah. Wow. Yeah, and would you say that the United States is in the same situation, or is it a completely other kind of clusterfuck?
I think the United States is really kind of eager to start a real civil war with actual bullets flying. It just doesn't know how. But the time will come when that'll happen. I think the future administrators of the United States are the narco cartels. I think they're the ones who have it the most together because everybody else, if you look at the political system, the Democrats, the Republicans, the civil servants, the judiciary, those are all fit to be tied. Those are all just living in some kind of a phantom world where the words they use no longer apply to the reality that they see around themselves. And so I think that there's going to be a civil war in the United States. I think, interestingly, in social terms, the Ukraine and the United States are sort of joined at the hip now. They're the Ukraine is sort of a parasitic twin of the United States, but the social processes that are going on in the Ukraine are similar to what's going on in the United States. Just a very curious development.
It's the first time I hear this idea of the narco cartels taking over the US. Would that be the reason the current administration seems to be? We are recording in mid-November, and you're probably going to see, whoever is watching this video is going to see it in early December. However, right now, so maybe by then there will already be a strike or an invasion, maybe, on Venezuela. Today, the saber rattling around Venezuela, and of course the excuse is pretty much the fighting war on drugs, which have been going on since the CIA started to to smuggle drug in the United States in the 70s and 80s. Do you think that's part of the counter plan, or by the Trump administration, or what?
Not at all. The Venezuela thing is about the fact, and the Nigeria thing, it's about the fact that the US is running out of shale oil. It's not really running out of it, it's running out of reasonable places to drill where the result would be affordable. So shale oil right now is supposed to be on a plateau, but I don't believe much of the statistics that are coming out, because what they're doing is putting a happy face on a sad situation to keep stock valuations sufficiently high. A lot of these companies are perpetually in debt and are basically zombies. So it's very important to make them look better than the situation actually warrants. So Venezuela is not about drugs. Venezuela is not a drug exporter. And so the idea that that the Trump administration is fighting the war on drugs in Venezuela is bogus. It is ridiculous. They're basically just lying. They're after the oil, but they don't know how to get at the oil, because Venezuelan oil is notoriously difficult to produce. Russian and Chinese companies are involved in producing that oil, but making it flow fast is not a problem that anyone has managed to solve. In fact, it's been flowing slower and slower because it's not really oil. We're at a point now, we're past peak oil, and we're at a point now in the world where people are using the word oil and applying it to things that aren't oil. So shale oil in the United States is not oil, it's gas condensate. And Venezuelan oil, it's not oil, it's tar that you have to steam out of the ground. And so on and so forth. But what's going on there is the United States doing the same thing it has done continuously for generations, which is always attack the wrong country. So you're fighting a war against terrorism, right? So why not attack a country that has zero terrorism, which is Iraq?
Yeah.
Makes perfect sense, right?
Yeah.
That has been the pattern, but I've written about it, and the pattern is just unmistakable. The United States always wages war against the country that couldn't possibly be the threat that the United States is supposed to be fighting. Always attack the wrong country. That's their motto. And Venezuela is no different. But the difference there is that, you see, Trump is not results oriented. He doesn't care what happens. He's a fact-resistant human. He doesn't care what reality is. He only cares about the picture on the TV that he watches. And he only cares about his tweets or whatever in social media. He thinks that that's reality. Real reality doesn't exist for him.
Yeah.
So he orders 2 submarines to be nuclear submarines to be deployed next to Russia. Has no idea which 2 submarines or where next to Russia. He has no idea that, you know, the the missiles that these submarines launch have such range that it doesn't matter where the submarines are. In fact, the most important thing about those submarines is that they would be nowhere close to Russia
Yeah,
to be
of course.
effective. So putting them next to Russia is stupid. He's a
Yes.
stupid man, and he doesn't know what he's talking about.
Yeah.
And the other thing is that nobody knows what those two submarines are. And then he starts talking about one submarine because one of those submarines has magically disappeared. And same thing in the Venezuela fiasco that's unfolding. Everything that they've tried with Venezuela up to this point has failed. There's no reason why that pattern should be any different, should change. But basically, they can't attack Venezuela. They know that they can't. They don't have the resources. They can sort of threaten Venezuela, but the risks of unaffordable damage, that is, ships sunk, uh, airplanes shot out of the sky, crews missing, etc. Lots of mercenaries or troops taken hostage on if they tried to land, or just getting killed. They can't risk that. So all they do is they they fly around and they steam around in circles and make threatening gestures. That's all they can do at this point. Now, as far as narco cartels, you said that there would be a war against them. The CIA is a narco cartel. You have to
Yes.
keep that in mind.
Yes.
So why would they wage war against themselves? Why wouldn't they just make friends with their narco cartel friends in other parts of the world? I mean, it's all about the market, about splitting up the market, and about getting the profits into the right pockets. So I think that the narco cartels moving into power in the United States is something that would happen rather seamlessly because it's been going on for generations.
Yes. No, I understand that point of view for sure. If you cross back the Atlantic on the other place that has been so peaceful for the last 100 years, Middle East, how is it? How is the view from Russia on what is happening now? Do you think we're having peace? Do you think it impacts Russia a lot? What's happening in around Israel and Iran and the Gulf region?
Well, from the Russian perspective, and here I'm piecing it together from open source Russian language, open source. Just taking it in a sequence. Israel is chock full of Russian citizens. A third of Israel is Russian speaking.
Yeah.
It's basically little Russia on the Mediterranean. As far as Russia is concerned. And Russia is not going to cut those ties. On the other hand, Israel, very interestingly, has lots of inroads into the United States. So Israel is not Russia's puppet by any means, but there's a lot of soft power. On the other hand, there's a lot of hard power that Israel can assert in the United States through various schemes, from influence to corruption to military cooperation, etc. There's just a lot going on. So Israel is a Russian asset to some extent, but not in any direct and directly usable way. Still, there is no reason to fight a war with Israel as far as Russia is concerned. And Israel is sometimes even forgiven for relatively unforgivable missteps where Russian crews get hurt. That has happened once over Syria. And the other thing is that the Al-Qaeda person now in charge of Syria, after the Syrian regime fell apart, after the Alawite supremacy got rubbed out, and the al-Assad dynasty decamped to Moscow. These Al-Qaeda people invited Russia back saying, please defend us against Israel and Turkey, which is very interesting. So Syria has realized, or whoever is in charge of Syria now has realized that without Russian help, Syria would not exist. So Syria is on Russian life support now and will be. Um, it has been on Russian life support for what, 80 some years now? Well, it'll be on Russian life support for another 80 years. So nothing to see there, move along, business as usual. As far as Israel grabbing a piece of Syria, grabbed Golan Heights and grabbed some areas, Druze areas in the south of Syria. Well, Syria is not the Levant; is just this patchwork of little tribal areas. So no reason to treat it as something that has territorial integrity. The areas in the north are Kurdish areas and Turkoman areas. Well, those are not Arab either, so let them go. Let them be Turkey's problem.
Yeah,
But Turkey's biggest problem is that there are millions of Syrian Arabs living in Turkey for for generations at this point, for a generation and a half, 2 generations, and there's no getting rid of them, and they're a problem for the Turks.
sure.
So Turkey at some point would become very interested, having failed in inserting all of these millions of people into Europe. Instead of inserting them into Europe, it took bribes from the European Union not to. Would be very interested in somehow getting Syria stabilized to a point where those can be inserted back into
Yeah.
Syria.
Well, I can tell you here in Turkey, and they have been here for at least a decade, of course, even more.
Hmm.
The difference with Europe is that here the law is applied with an incredible violence. So if you steal, if you commit crimes as a refugee, you're in big trouble, and they will find
Hmm.
you. So that's the difference: is that it is still a nation state. Turkey is still behaving like I don't know, Europe would behave until the 70s, or Russia still behave. I thought that, for example, freedom is very big in Russia. In the last few weeks, I've been going around the big cities and small villages, and you can do pretty much what you want, and you can do your business. You can do, however, if you do cross the law, um, and it's not a police, and even less a military state, but then you're in trouble. And whereas in Europe, nothing happens if you break the law, unless you're white, of course, unless you're local, and that's bad. But if you're a foreigner in France or the UK, statistically you won't get caught, they won't investigate, and they probably won't chastise you a lot. And even if they do, it's for not long time in prison, and prison is like a 3-star hotel. You can even have your wife visit you, or girlfriends, or prostitute. I don't see this in Turkey, and I don't see this in Russia happening.
No, Russia is fairly strict and becoming stricter um, pretty much across the board. It's a very law-abiding place at this point, and very safe,
Yeah, very safe.
incredibly safe. In St. Petersburg, where I live, is a city of over 5 million people. I think it's going towards 6 million because of all of the exurbs being built up. Huge high rises, Chinese style high rises getting put up at an incredible rate. Whole new districts and cities coming up right around St. Petersburg in a ring. They're building a new ring highway around it and extending the metro, etc. So it's just growing and growing. But it's a place where school kids can just go wander around.
Yeah.
Uh, Girls think nothing of walking home at night. Um,
No.
this didn't used to be the fact, but the fact is that anybody who could cause trouble has been rounded up and
Yeah.
processed and probably released, and a lot of them have been sent out of the country.
True.
Uh,
Like
a
I've
lot,
said.
a lot of crime was ethnic crime before, and these people have been dealt with rather harshly. So ethnic mafias are still in existence in Russia, but they're under tighter and tighter control. And the latest trend is that guest workers can no longer bring their families. They can come, they can work, and they can go back home.
Yes.
And that's going to be the pattern. The other thing is that the Russians are realizing that importing guest workers from the stands of the Central Asia is not such a great deal when you can get the North Koreans and the Indians and the Pakistanis and whoever else from relatively civilized and well-educated and prosperous countries for the same money to come and work in Russia because there's a labor shortage in Russia.
Yes.
And unemployment rate is at zero practically. So that's something that is happening in Russia that is also helping stabilize the situation in terms of crime.
Yeah, definitely. I confirm that as a Swiss, I had to go through immigration control with our Vietnamese and Korean friends, North Korean friends. And I even saw quite a lot of North Korean tourists on the Red Square and around the museums there, which was very surprising. So how is Russia's relationship with Asia going? I mean, even Japan seems to not apply a lot of sanctions. In fact, they're still buying oil and gas from Russia. Is Russia finally turning completely to the Asian century?
Well, the European Union, you may be surprised to know, is still the largest importer of Russian natural gas, except it's liquefied now mostly. There's
Hmm.
some going through Turk Stream, um, through the Black Sea in Turkey, um, but it's still the largest buyer. Of course, it wants to stop, and that's just another way for Europe to kill itself economically,
Yeah,
which it's too
you
eager to
mentioned
do.
you mentioned before the rearming of Europe. It's going to be tough without energy.
Well, yes, they're going to be sitting in the dark with these stupid weapons that don't work, waiting for Russia to attack. Great plan. I mean,
Yeah,
fantastic plan. Russia will never attack. I
no.
can guarantee that. There's really nothing in Europe that Russia wants,
Yeah.
especially not all of these refugees.
No, it's
You can
sad.
keep them.
We
You can keep them. You
there's
let
a
them in, they're
there's
yours.
a there's a few Europeans who would love to be liberated by Russia, but we know it's not going to happen. So and
Well,
rightfully so, and rightfully so. It's not Russia's business to come and help us. We need to help ourselves. But we're
well, the
not many.
historical pattern is that Europe runs into some ridiculous problem with fascism or something else. Then the Russians come in and liberate it, and the European countries are destroyed. There's no economy, they can't grow food, etc. So the Russians feed them because the Russians always make the distinction between the stupid government and the fairly reasonable people.
Yeah,
So they always come to the rescue of the people. They came to the rescue of the Germans after losing so many people fighting the Germans. They they weren't doing that well after the war themselves, but they shipped long trains of food, of grain to Germany to feed the
that's true.
Germans.
That's true.
No other country would do that.
My
The Europeans
grandfather.
themselves would let each other starve. I can promise you that. But
Yeah,
what that does, what that means is that the Europeans have this idea that if all else fails, you go to war against Russia, you lose, and then the Russians feed you. So I think
yeah.
that in the back of their minds, they're thinking that this will happen again, and I'm here to tell you that it won't.
No, it's true. My grandfather, and I wrote a novel about his ordeal as a prisoner of war in Germany. He was liberated by the Red Army and was fed, and everyone who was liberated were fed, despite being the enemy. In his case, being Italian. Certainly, the Asia is still growing and it's still developing. And indeed, we see. Sorry if I came back to Europe with that. I sidetracked your thoughts, but we were talking about Asia
Hmm.
and Russia's business development with the not only Asia but BRICS in general, but specifically China, North Korea as well. Um, so again, I was so surprised to see North Korean tourists, families This is so against what in the media we've been told. So is it nomenclatura? Is it people who, you know, bring the family before they come and work? What's Russia doing with Asia right now?
Well, of course, the North Koreans that are allowed to travel to Russia as tourists are the politically vetted ones, but that describes all of North Korea. The whole country is politically vetted. So you have to keep that in mind. So
Yeah.
these are just regular tourists. And that kind of goes without saying about North Korea. But North Korea is kind of, you know, it's significant, but it's small. But
Small.
the elephant in the room is China. And China and Russia, people say, well, could we drive a wedge between some silly Americans keep talking about that. How do we drive a wedge between Russia and China? Well, think about what China does. China exports manufactured products to the entire planet. It is the main trading partner of the entire planet. And how does it ship those products? Well, let's see. You can go across the Pacific Ocean, but the Pacific Ocean is half the planet. It takes a long time to get there, and the accessible parts of it are the ports in California and Vancouver. So that's kind of limited. Um, there's the Strait of Malacca, which if uh, if there were uh, no other export routes available to China, the Americans could terrorize China by closing the Strait of Malacca. There's also the export route through Russia. There's the North Sea Passage, which is becoming more and more popular. A container ship from China just made it all the way through in late October with an icebreaker. So that's a new development, and the Chinese are just really happy about that. There's the Trans-Siberian Railroad, which is uh, just absolutely pegged. There's, I think, a 2-minute pause between trains now, freight trains on the Trans-Siberian. It is just completely pegged out. Very busy. There's the Central Asia, but not that reliable and a troublesome sort of place for China. And that's it.
Mhm.
So if you export through Russia, through through the North Sea to Murmansk, for instance, and then use the extensive Russian um, network of railroads and canals, etc., you can export through the Caspian, through the Black Sea, and then through the Suez if you want. Um, you have all of these export routes, but what's the common theme there? The common theme is that if China cannot export through Russia, China cannot export. So what does that mean in terms of Chinese-Russian relations? It means that they're tied together forever. And the other thing is that the other thing to mention is guess where China's nuclear deterrent, the silos for its ICBMs, are located? Right along the Russian border. And why would that be the case? Well, because it's one system, really. So in terms of their nuclear deterrent strategy, they have one strategy. So I think that pretty much explains, you know, Russia's position towards the Far East, the Pacific Rim of that part of the world. Russia's position is China's position.
Yeah, makes sense. How do you see we mentioned the United States and we mentioned Europe. You've made a very good point from the separation, the differentiation between the crazy people in the government and the intelligence and the apparatchiks across the West and the common sense people. And I must say that I'm afraid to unfortunately say that there's a lot of common people who are completely brainwashed by the government, who, of course, it remains on social network. It's no threat. They support the current wars. One day they support Ukraine, the next day they support Palestine, the next day they may support Israel. It's very bizarre. And including on the right, the people who, there's a split. Some people, support is not the word, but they clearly see in Russia the future in terms of morals, in terms of way of thinking and behaving. And I've visited some of the churches and monasteries around Moscow, and they were full of people on Sundays for sure. And some people support Ukraine because, well, let's be fair, because Nazis support Nazis, and this is so stupid in my opinion. Anyway, so I don't even want to start and go there, but the psychological effect on people is very important in any collapse, as you wrote. The social, the one of the stages of collapse that is the most worrisome is the social collapse. Do you see that advancing in the West or elsewhere?
Yes, I can see it advancing in the United States, as I've observed before. Social collapse, the ability of the people to form a single entity, has pretty much evaporated in the United States. It was on shaky ground to begin with because of individualism, because people treated their own as their own and everybody else as strangers. And that for a long time was actually a positive about the United States, is that you could be a mass murderer and buy a little house in suburbia and marry a woman and have 2 children and a cat and a dog and a couple of cars and work an office job, and your neighbors wouldn't even care that you are a mass murderer and a maniac and whoever else, because they just really don't care who the neighbors are, as long as the lawn is mowed to 10 centimeters or less. That's the only thing that mattered in America. And the facade had to be painted, not the back of it, just the front visible from the road. And the car couldn't have too many dents on it. That would be bad too. But people really cared about superficial appearances and nothing else. And that was a good thing about America. But as things get bad and worse and worse and worse and worse, never mind the appearances. Once the appearances are gone, you have absolutely nothing. And you have these people who have really no way to associate. The most tight-knit groups in America at this point, I would say, are the drug addicts on the street. They can find common cause like this, They need their next fix. And so their prerogatives and priorities are very simple, and they can get along on that basis. But everybody else, it's just really fallen apart. And then everybody became internet addicted, and the problem with the internet is that it provides you choice, which means that you and your neighbor can consume completely different content and have completely different things going on in your brains that are incompatible. So if you bring those people together face to face, they can't even speak the same language. And then every effort has been made to separate people from each other and to segregate them into 2 political parties, absolutely superficially, because there's no difference between the Republicans and the Democrats. They're the same party. They just play games with each other in terms of stealing people. They're body snatchers, basically. So depending on which party snatched your body, you're in one camp or the other. And now that things are falling apart, these 2 camps will go to war against each other for real. So that's what's happening in the United States.
Perhaps as a last question, I have to always have a tough question, but it's a question I receive because, like you, for 15 years, I've been predicting the collapse of the West. And some people say, it's not going as fast as you predicted, therefore your predictions are wrong. How do you respond to these critics? You've been perhaps wiser than me not to give timeline, but you understand where the critics come from. Let's assume these critics are well-meaning and constructive. How I usually reply to give you my reply is to say, don't wish it to go too fast, but perhaps you have a different view, as you write in your books, that you should collapse soon and often, but it's a specific behavior that and mindset that you think is right. In fact, there's two questions.
Okay, well, I went to the opera recently, and at the Mariinsky Theater in St. Petersburg. It was fantastic. The Huguenots was the opera, and sung in French in a way that I couldn't really understand very well. French sung in Russian doesn't sound right. But anyway, there were in the opera there are three bells. First bell just kind of means finish drinking your coffee or whatever, eating your croissant. And second means you should probably be getting up and wandering back into the auditorium. And third is you should probably be finishing your conversation with the people around you and sitting down, right? And then the action starts. Well, same thing with collapse. So I would say the first bell was Y2K of all things. That was the first bell. That was the finish your espresso and your croissant call. Second bell was the financial collapse of 2008. That was get up and start moving.
Yeah.
And now I think we're coming up on the third bell. It hasn't rung yet, but it's about to. The 2008 collapse was covered over with fake money. And the next step is fake money stops working. So suddenly the realization hits that financial authorities are no longer able to bail out this fake realm, and stock valuations based on NVIDIA and a bunch of other companies that make products that nobody really needs are actually worthless. And that will be the third bell, and then the opera will start. And the opera will go on and on and on until, as they say, the fat lady sings. In the Mariinsky Theater, the Huguenots opera took 4 hours. So be patient.
I am patient. I'm not. I don't. In fact, I'm not eager for the collapse, and I'm not eager to be vindicated, to be right, because I know it means a lot of suffering. It means a lot of destruction. But I also know that it's an inevitable path to rebirth and reconstruction, and perhaps a different world, because we really need a different world. After 200 years of trial and error into all sorts of ideologies, it's time we come back to reality and common sense. And it's not going to be easy. It's not going to be easy. Dimitri, thank you very much for your time. Once again, where can people find your work, besides your books, of course, everywhere, but your website is still the same?
Yes, it's boosty.to/Club Orlov, CLUBORLOV. I blog there. I just published a book called The Brown New Deal. It's a 300-page book of essays, which you can order from Amazon or download from my blog, from my site, from Boosty. I'm about to start doing sort of podcast type things, because fewer and fewer people read and more people want to listen. So I'll be doing podcasts with my cat for a co-host, because I find that my cat asks the best questions.
I will put all these links in this description, and if I can speak cat, I would love to come to your podcast one day. For sure.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Спасибо большое. And
Пожалуйста.
we'll speak again soon. Take care.
Very good. Bye-bye, Pierre.
Bye-bye.